Hello everyone, welcome back. It's May 1st of 2022, and in today's video I'd like to talk a little bit about certain things that affect the hardiness of your fruit tree buds besides just temperature. Of course, temperature is a big one, and the chart that you're looking at is the Michigan State University chart that you probably have seen around a lot of the fruit growing forums online. There are many others like it. I mean, the information is pretty much is what it is, so there are many sources you can get this information from. But I made a video last year showing an orchard walk and kind of using this chart. I'll put the link to that video in the description box below. But essentially, the long and short of this chart is that the more developed your fruit buds are at any given point in time, the more susceptible they are to frost damage. And when we say frost, really, for fruit trees, you're talking below 30 degrees. If it's above 30, even if it's 32, you're not really going to suffer any damage. It's when it gets significantly below 32. So 27 is kind of like the number where you start to worry, typically, at least in our area. So if you look for apples, for example, and in that video I put the link to, I walk through the orchard and show you some examples. And we'll take an orchard walk momentarily here, and I'll refer back to this a little bit. But for example, for apples, if you're looking at silvertip on the left, those numbers, 10% kill and 90% kill. 10% kill at 15 degrees. That means if it's 15 degrees for at least half an hour, then 10% of those buds will be killed by the frost. Now, they probably will still open and look pretty and flower, but the internal parts of the flower that produce the fruit will be destroyed by the cold. 90% kill is 2 degrees for silvertip. And then you kind of go all the way through. You notice the numbers get higher because, for example, if you look at first pink in the middle, 10% bud kill is 28 degrees. So at 28 degrees, 10% of those buds will be killed if they're exposed for half an hour or more. And 90% at 24 degrees. So that's not a huge difference between those two numbers. So when you're looking at this chart and kind of trying to determine your frost damage, this is one of those things that's an average. There are other things that play a role as well. Cultivars. There are some types of apples, pears, what have you, but especially apples that I can speak to for sure. There are certain varieties that are just a few degrees hardier. So first pink, 28 degrees might kill most apples, and this is based on Red Delicious, actually, this chart. But if you have a hardier cultivar, maybe first pink, there's a 10% bud kill at 26 degrees instead of 28. So cultivar can play a role. But I want to talk about some other things that aren't often mentioned, and we'll take a little orchard walk. Some other factors that play a role in terms of how to avoid late frosts and things you can do to perhaps position yourself for success. So let's head out to the orchard, and we'll talk as we walk through a little bit. So here we're in the side orchard, and I want to show you, number one is cultivar. That makes a big difference. So you're looking at a golden russet tree here on Geneva 11 rootstock. We're going to get to that again in a minute. But notice this tree is leafing out well. Look at that's a tight cluster right there, if you think back to the chart from the beginning. And tight clusters are susceptible, but not super susceptible. This tree, though, is ahead of all the other trees in the yard. So cultivar plays a role. You can see this and kind of bank this in your memory as we look at some of the other trees. That tree is ready to really start flowering any minute. I'm just going to back up so it's still in our view so you can see how close we are to this next tree. Now look at the difference. This is a northern spy on Geneva 40. So not only cultivar, northern spies wake up really, really late. You can see they're just barely starting. Actually, first year ever we've had any fruit buds on this tree. This was planted in 2018, so it's been a 5 years now. This will be its 5th year in the ground. 18, 19, 20, yeah, 5th year in the ground. And so that's about right for northern spy. It's not the most precocious apple. But you notice that tree, there's nothing going on at all hardly. And so if you live in an area where you get a lot of late frosts, one thing you might think about is planting at least a few cultivars. Doesn't have to be every, but a couple or a few trees that just wake up later. And this sort of avoids the problem of late frost if the tree's not even awake. I'm thinking back to that chart at the beginning. Here's another one that wakes up late, the one they nicknamed the wise apple, Court Penju Plat. Just starting to wake up. This again was planted in 2019, actually, not 2018, 2019 for this one. But look, we have some buds for the first time ever, some fruit buds, so I'm excited about that. You can see the spurs under my fingers there, the fruit spurs. This is one of those that they make really, really short, fat little buds, and then those open into the flowers. That's on MM111, which is a pretty common rootstock. So it just goes to show, cultivar and rootstock play a large role, and I'm going to kind of come back to rootstock in a minute, and you'll see we have another golden russet on a different rootstock, and it's dramatically different. This is Kids Orange Red on Geneva 11. I really like Geneva 11 rootstock. As you can see, the two trees we have on it are kind of fat and short. Those dwarfing rootstocks are nice because then you don't have to prune as much. I've barely touched either of those trees. They've just been shaped this way naturally, so you don't necessarily have to prune them if they're a shape you like and they're working for you. Now this is on a Bud 9 rootstock. This is Blue Pearmain that we're getting a little closer to. This is kind of like an in-between, so it's not as woken up as the ones on Geneva 11 are. You can see just starting to become a tight cluster. See those buds look like little petals inside there? Those will kind of fatten up into a tight cluster. So this is between half-inch green, mostly tight cluster, but getting there from half-inch green. That's a Bud 9 rootstock. It's about as big as that tree is going to get. Planted in 2017. All of these trees in this area were 2017. They were all planted the same day, actually. And then as we went back, the orchard gets kind of younger in a sense. So here's an example of rootstock. This is also a golden russet, but unlike the first tree I showed you, there's barely anything going on. I don't know the rootstock for this one. This one came from Starks, and so they don't tell you the rootstock. They can only give you a few options, so I just don't know. But notice, this is also the one I'm using as a multi-grafted apple tree, so there's about 20 kinds of apples on this. So it's kind of a monstrosity looking thing right now, which is fine. It's my Frankenstein tree. But notice there's really nothing going on. There's also, by the way, it's never flowered yet, and it was planted in 2017. So rootstock plays a role in precocity, flowering, and also when it wakes up, because if it wakes up later, that's kind of what you want. This is Calville Blanc. I love this. The shape of this tree is one of my favorites. Geneva 935 rootstock. You can see tight clusters there, but most of the buds on this tree are in the half-inch green phase still, which is less susceptible. You can see there's a half-inch green right there. That'll open up into a tight cluster. You can see that buds packed in there really tight. When they're packed in there really tight, they're protected by the leaf, by the fact that they're tightly bunched. That's a tight cluster. So the more they open up and the more they're exposed, the more and more susceptible they are. Those are half-inch green there. So this tree will be fine. And then here's another example of a late bloomer, so to speak, Pitmaston pineapple. This is on MM111. This tends to be a really late tree. So if you're in a place where it's constantly an issue, your trees are flowering early and then getting wiped out by the frost, consider cultivars like Pitmaston pineapple, Court Penju Plat, Northern Spy. Fantastic apples, all of them. That's why we're growing them. They're really good, at least in our opinion. Knobbed russet, as you'll see, is another one. But a lot of those old russety apples, they wake up later, and so you just don't have the issue of having them bloom. So we talked about rootstock and cultivar. Let's take a walk over to the north orchard. Here's our garden. We've got our deer netting. Even though we've fenced in our entire backyard, as you saw, the front little hallway there is not fenced in the front yard, and so they could theoretically get in here. They haven't. I haven't seen a single deer since I've fenced in the backyard. I just got tired of spraying liquid fence. I'm going to have to buy stock in that company, so it was just getting too expensive, and this way we'll get to see our lilacs this year, which is nice. Location is another aspect. This is the north side of the property, and it's the coldest side. It's low-lying, and I'll talk about some other parts in a minute, but this is a Honeycrisp tree, and you can see it's not even hardly waking up at all. Now, this is slightly unusual. for this tree, but we've also had a really cold spring, and so that could be part of it too. But it's also in sort of a low-lying pocket. You realize that when you build a fence that follows the ground, how your ground is contoured. We just went by a pawpaw tree. This is, you're looking at right now, a knobed russet tree. Also, barely anything going on, but if you go in, just a few leaves here and there. Incidentally, when you're talking about location, I've noticed that when pawpaws are near apples, we get almost no bugs that attack. That Honeycrisp tree next to the pawpaw got the same spray regimen as all of our other apples, and we had like no bugs on it. All of our other apples had a lot of bugs because I only sprayed once. Ignore the pile of wood there. Still a construction zone, still cleaning up. This is the coldest corner of the yard, and we have our apricot and our nectarine here, which may seem counterintuitive. Why would you put your apricot, which is right there, and nectarine here, in the coldest spot in your yard? Well, the goal is to keep it asleep as long as possible. It's not an issue of hardiness. These are the buds on the nectarine. You can see they're not even really, they're just starting to kind of swell a little. It was supposed to, by the way, be a Red Haven peach. We found out last summer when we got two nectarine fruits on there that it was not a peach, which is okay. They were really good. Don't know what kind it is though. This is the Hero Gem apricot, which is bred to flower late. So it was bred in Ontario, Canada for our area. We're in southwestern New York State. And you can see the flower buds there, calyx red stage, just starting to get going. These are really hardy. That could go down to like 10 degrees at this stage. So location. If you have fruit trees like these that are kind of marginal for your area, now apricots are going to grow well around here, but the problem usually is they flower too early and then the spring frost wipes them out. Those are our newly painted stars, kind of the colors of the town we live in, purple and gold. The one fell off the house, so it was a little beaten up, but still good for fence art. We have a nice view of the sky here, but the fence behind where we're standing is the north side of the property, so looking south. So it gets south-facing sun, but it's in this little pocket of cool air over here. This is always the last place the snow melts in the yard. So pay attention to that. You know, if you put trees in the coldest spots in your yard purposely, they're going to wake up a lot later, and therefore you might just avoid spring frost, and you don't have to do anything. You just let nature take its course for you. So this kind of gives you a sense of looking out the rest of the north part of the orchard. Yeah, but this nectarine was it was a white flesh nectarine. I don't know what kind it is, but it was really good. I didn't know if it was going to live through the winter, but if it lived through this winter, it'll live through any winter, because we had a really cold winter that lasted a long time. And then, you know, a bonus footage of our lilacs. I'm a big lilac fan. Got all lined up through here. We actually get to see them this year. As I mentioned, the deer usually eat every single bud off of them, so having them protected is really nice. 6-foot wooden fence, deer can jump over it if they want, but they just tend not to, unless they're being chased by something, but they're not going to jump in on a normal basis. So thank you for watching. As you can see, it's amazing. You can go from this to just a few feet away this, and it can be based on cultivar, location, and rootstock. So I hope you found this helpful. If you want to see last year's video where we take apart some flowers, definitely click on the link in the description box below. It kind of went through all the things you want to look for in terms of your buds. Just for reference, this year I did the same thing you'll see in that video, and about 80% of our apple buds were killed based on my survey, but 20% is still plenty to get a full crop. So I wanted to mention before we go here, on that note, when you're looking at those charts, it can sound scary when you see 90% bud kill, but honestly that is probably ideal for a lot of fruit trees. Now, not cherry trees, but your large tree fruits, your apples, peaches, pears, pawpaws even, things like that. This is a basket of peaches from last year, and I'm showing this because I wanted to mention that last year we had 90% bud kill on most of our trees. Here's a box of blue pearmain apples, and we still had a full crop. And so you're going to have, when you think of your tree, it's going to put out thousands of blossoms on a mid-size apple tree. it can't set thousands of fruit. So 90% bud kill, although it sounds terrible, and it's not ideal, really. I mean, you want all your blossoms to do well and everything, and you just don't want to stress about it, and that's understandable. But really, 90% bud kill is not that big a deal. So this year I mentioned we had probably 80% bud kill on our apples. We're going to have so many apples we don't know what to do with them, which is great. I'll make some cider or something out of them. But that's one of the fun things about understanding your trees and knowing what's going on, and that's a good thing. But my advice for what it's worth is don't do any of the crazy things that you read online about people trying to set up sprinklers, which doesn't work, by the way, anyway. There's a whole way you have to do that if you're going to use water and it isn't setting up a sprinkler in your side yard when it's 25 degrees out. Just think of the logistics of that. There are a lot of things that you can do that hurt the situation more than help. There's also a lot of things that you can do that you read online that if you do them, you're going to end up with roughly the same results anyway. If you have 40% bud kill versus 20% bud kill, at the end of the day, you're going to end up with the same crop because the tree can only support so many fruit anyway. So look at it as Mother Nature's built-in defense. There are some things you can do ahead of time, like we mentioned. Think of your location. If you're in a place where late frosts are a real problem, put your trees in the coldest part of your property. If you're looking, and then they won't flower until much later when the chance of frost is less. That's the idea. Hardiness is not going to be a problem. A few degrees difference isn't going to kill your tree in terms of surviving the winter. Cultivar. So if you take a cultivar that likes to wake up late and you pair it with a rootstock that likes to wake up late and you put it in a location this cold, well, maybe be careful. Your trees might not flower till June. That's an exaggeration, but maybe not, depending on your zone. But the thing is, the later your trees flower, the better off you're going to be for most things. You're still going to get a crop. Something like a pawpaw, there's less information about. So that's, if anyone knows anything, put it in the description box below if you've seen anything like this chart that includes pawpaw. Because I'm just going kind of anecdotally what we have. We got a couple of fruits last year, but our trees are too young really to do much until maybe this year. So we'll see. We've had flowers for a couple of years, but the frost definitely killed them last year. They just turned to mush. So if anyone knows anything about that, that would be really interesting. But again, thank you for watching. Use the chart, learn about your trees. That's a good thing. But don't panic. Don't worry too much. Now, something like cherries, 90% bud kill, yeah, you're going to lose a lot of your crop. But your large fruit isn't going to make too much difference anyway. You're still going to see a full crop. You might not even notice if you weren't checking into it, in this fashion. So thank you for watching. Please join us again soon. We have a bunch of great content lined up in the coming days and weeks, and we hope to see you again soon.